Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here and lend my support for the Iwo Jima Monument West Luncheon. I know a lot of hard work has gone into this already to making this a reality, and for sure there's much work left to be done. So Laura, thank you for asking me to participate today, and more importantly, thank you for all that you do to lead the efforts and all of your energy and leadership in the effort to make this Monument West a reality. So thank you. I got to tell you, as a lieutenant general on active duty, I wouldn't have put myself in this position, and I can tell that, now that I'm retired, I don't get the respect that I used to. I would never put myself in a position to follow the great speakers that we've had already. So would you give them one more hand? What great stories. Thank you so much. And I know that we've got one really more important thing to do today, and that's the unveiling of this magnificent memorial. And so my comments will be brief. In fact, it bears to mind a couple of years ago, I had to go to Australia and take the lectern in a Navy conference out there, and my host, if you will, an Australian Navy captain, said, "Hey, look, mate, we're going to judge your comments today the way we judge our women's dresses. It's got to be short enough to keep our attention, but just long enough to cover the essentials." So I promise you that I'll do both today. Now, Laura's asked me to talk about the strategic importance of Iwo Jima at the time and what this monument will mean for all Americans now, through my perspective, really, as a former commander of the Marine Corps Forces Pacific. The namesake of this monument, of course, is also called the U.S. Marine Corps War Memorial, and it's located in Arlington, Virginia. The 32-foot high figures are shown raising a 60-foot bronze flagpole. The flag at the top of the pole flies at full mast 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and what you may not know is that's done by presidential proclamation. It is the only service-specific war memorial recognized by Congress, although there are many other service-related monuments located around Washington, D.C. area. Millions of Americans and foreigners visit the monument every year. Laura so eloquently points out that it bears an inescapable relationship with all Americans, no matter the generation. The image taken by Joe Rosenthal, as pointed out by Ed Arnold so eloquently this morning, so enthralled the American citizens at home that it resulted in over 3 million war bonds. And as he pointed out, billions of dollars that were raised in that. And of course, all of the newspapers took legal, license at the time and reprinted that, famous poster and sold them as their own, which was very interesting for the time. But what that photo really did was give America hope, and that we are now on the verge of finally ending a long war, and it renewed in the American people a sense of purpose and support at home that carried through until the final surrender. The strategic importance of the battle where Rosenthal's famous photo was taken was at the time controversial, given all of the toll in human capital and assets that it took, but is rarely debated today. And as in my position as the former commander of the U.S. Marines in the Pacific, I believe its value cannot be overstated. I had the honor of participating in a couple of the reunion of honors, and most recently, a couple of years ago, with our then Commandant Jim Amos. And as we both drove after the reunion of honor up to the memorial at the top of Mount Suribachi, we went over to the edge and just stood and talked about the battle itself for a while, and then talked about those things that it means for us today. And both the Commandant and I are steadfast in our belief that winning this battle helped really shorten the war effort and ensured the existence of the Marine Corps for eternity. A priceless gift given to all of us that we can never repay to those who fought, especially those in this room. The island now, of course, is green in many places, volcanic black in others, and windswept. And if you had the opportunity to go there and stand at the bottom of Mount Suribachi, you'd be awed in exactly how really steep it is. And if you remember back in all the black and white photos of the battle at the time and how it was, literally decimated by the naval gunfire and other fires that prepped the battles before the war, it'd be hard for you to imagine that we could even make it to the top of that famous mountain and put that flag up because it is so steep and so hard to climb. And it really stands in stark contrast to the things that those men at the time had to do and fight their way up. In my role as the 3MEF commander, as the commander of all forces in Japan, based in Okinawa, I had the occasion to visit the island several times, mostly through stopover flights in a Hornet or a C-130 on our way to training in either Guam or some of the other Marshall Islands. It has a very good runway and building facilities, and it's run now by the Japanese Coast Guard. And it's headed by a Japanese captain, and generally every one of those is a very strong naval officer and very easy to get along with. However, they rarely let anyone pass through there except for the reunions of honor and for official business, with authorizations that are rare and few and far between. Where once our reunions were a sideshow to be tolerated by the Japanese government, they now treat many of the sites on the island as sacred, and they have a long-term plan for their own repatriation of the remains on the island, which is an outstanding thing and really brought about by the reunions of honor. To consider the strategic importance of Iwo Jima, which the Japanese now call Iwo To, you need to understand that by 1944, America and her allies in the Pacific War had the ascendancy. In the West, the Japanese were being turned back in Burma, and island hopping had isolated Japanese forces in the eastern sector. Combined with the attacks on Iwo Jima was America's desire to finally destroy Japan's merchant fleet so that the Japanese mainland could not be supplied from the food-rich sectors of the Southeast Asia, which Japan had complete control over. Linked to this was the destruction of Japan's remaining industrial base by the bombing of our Air Force. Most of you know Iwo Jima is a very small Pacific island, just over 4.5 miles long and about 2.5 miles wide, which lies at the foot of the Bonin Islands, south of the mainland island of Japan. Despite its size, Iwo Jima's possession, as viewed by both the Japanese government and our government at the time, gave the owner unparalleled strategic as well as tactical importance. There were 2 airfields on the island under Japan's control. They could be used by the Japanese fighter planes to attack American bombers on their flights to Japan. Under American control, the airfields could be used as emergency landing bases for damaged airplanes in the bombing raids. They could also be used for American fighter planes to escort the bombers as they needed smaller runways for the takeoff rolls. In all, 2,251 B-29 landings were made on Iwo Jima, and during the war, over 1,191 fighter escorts and over 3,081 strike sorties were flown from the island of Iwo Jima against Japan. But in the end, I think the real strategic value laid in the lessons we learned from assaulting Iwo Jima and how we applied those to the amphibious landing in Okinawa and the subsequent campaign, and for the planning of the eventual assault on mainland Japan. And finally, and most importantly, because it deserves repeating, the tenacity and courage of those who fought the battle ensured the survival of the Marine Corps for what we all hope is eternity. During a time post-war when the other services were vying for relevancy, and the Marine Corps was a prime target if cuts were to be made. And just as importantly, winning that battle imbued in the average American pride in a Corps it could finally identify with, and with whom our country had confided in calling on when our nation is least ready. That one battle did all of this for us and more. So it's fitting that this memorial, strategically placed aboard Camp Pendleton, be a beacon for the millions of commuters to see every day as they traverse Southern California, and will, I believe, ultimately become a revered place where all visitors who may not have access to the Marine Corps War Memorial in Washington, D.C. can visit, experience a similar reminder, and they can see, touch, contemplate, and marvel at the courage of those Marines and sailors who fought the battle those 36 fateful days in February and March 1945. The monument, with your support, can and will become a special place and one of the most visited sites in Southern California. Thank you again for asking me to speak today, and my special thanks and respect for those brave heroes who fought at Iwo Jima and who grace us with their presence today. Semper Fi.